Good morning, everyone. Give them a round of applause, please. That was a presentation of this province's brilliant culture, dance, and history. As you know, the Zulu people are the indigenous inhabitants of this beautiful province of KwaZulu-Natal, and this is just a taste of the political culture. Part and parcel of what we do in international relations is called cultural diplomacy, where we share each other's cultures in order for us to unite people, for us to understand people. And this dancing that we've seen and singing is a true reflection of how we together will have to share our cultures as part and parcel of our regional integration efforts. My name is Lazi Somia. I'm from the Southern African Liaison Office. Today I have the unfortunate task of chairing the sessions. However, today's journey, this discussion is very important for this region and the continent at large. First and foremost, I would like to apologize for the late start. There were some gremlins that we had to deal with today. And part and parcel of dealing with those gremlins is unfortunately a late start. But yet, our meeting has kicked off. To not waste any further ado, I would like to bring on my colleague Munjozi Mutandiri to give our opening remarks and welcome remarks to this gathering. Thank you so much. Munjozi, please go ahead.
Yeah, I don't know where to start in terms of apologies, because it's not a good thing to start a meeting with apologies. But I take comfort in that Lord has already apologized on behalf of the organization, so I don't have to repeat the shameful act of apologizing before we start a meeting. Colleagues, comrades, and friends, I want to welcome you to this SALO side event. I see that a lot of the faces I'm seeing here are not new to what we do as SALO. That is to convene, to bring voices together, to talk about the critical issues of the day. And as we want to think we are doing, to build consensus at community level, at national level, and at regional level. And hopefully we have made some strides towards that. And we meet today at this side event, which of course is on the sidelines of People's Summit, convened ahead of the 46th SADC Head of State Summit. And we know that as you saw on the programs which were shared, I think you should be having nice coffee somewhere. But the program will indicate that we are discussing reflections on the intersection of critical minerals governance, regional peace and security, and using the case of Mozambique for two important things. The first one, we believe that at SALO, that the Mozambican story is an important story for this region, and it has to be told to the region. And secondly, we believe that there are lessons and points of convergence on the Mozambican story to build a solid, coherent regional agenda for critical minerals governance, but also for peace and security. And so to look at what lessons can we get from Mozambique and what lessons can we bring into the processes that are happening in Mozambique. From elsewhere in the region and beyond. Yesterday, in the main plenary, for those that were not here, I think a number of things came out quite strongly. That this region, the people of this region, have a lot of frustrations, a lot of fears about the trajectory of development and their well-being since independence. So those frustrations came out quite clear. And I think that besides those frustrations, there is also an underlying hope that a lot of participants expressed, that with the tweaking of our priorities, it is possible that we can substantially change not just the material conditions of our people for good, but we can change the trajectory this region takes in terms of its development. That we are at a critical moment in terms of a global resource race. The first one, of course, you have to be formalized through the Berlin Conference. And we are at another moment where there is a race towards resources. And yesterday, the scars of what happened in 1884 were quite clear from the audience, from the people who spoke and participated, that if we are not careful, even as we hold a significant amount of the critical minerals that will drive the next phase of global development, we are likely to repeat what we saw in the first race for resources. And so the challenge is, what is it that we can do differently this time around to ensure that the resources we have really develop this region and this continent, and that our people are beneficiaries of the resources we have? And that's the question we have today, to try and discuss the moment we are, underscore how important it is to how we are going to shape the tomorrow of this region, and using the leverage of South Africa's chairship, put a clear civil society agenda on the table of what needs to be done for this region to really move forward. And because of time, let me take the opportunity to welcome many of you from different parts of the region, particularly the colleagues from Mozambique who are part and panel of speakers. I think Lord will introduce the speakers quite comprehensively. We have some very important brains to help us shape this discussion, but also hopefully to help us inform the South African priority areas for its chairship, not just for 26-27, but also beyond 26-27. Hopefully this year we can lay foundations for a robust engagement between our governments and the citizens of this region, and shape a more sustainable agenda for critical minerals governance, natural resources governance, and peace and stability. Anchored issues of peace and stability, anchored, of course, on human rights, democracy, and all those things that we have cried over for many years. And that solidarity will become a reality, not when only governments are supporting each other after post-election violence, but genuine solidarity, as we saw, this kind of solidarity that drove the liberation of this region. And yeah, so with those remarks, Lwazi, I think that we'll have to cut on time a bit because we're an hour late. We also will be disrupted a bit. We anticipating that the deputy minister might come at any point because we wanted to hear from government what their priorities would be. So if she does, we might get disrupted. If she doesn't make it, we also will not cry foul over that. Thank you, colleagues, and wishing you a robust engagement on the question of this. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, Mundlozi Mutambiri, for that brief introduction. As you know, in this program, we were supposed to start off with the Deputy Minister of International Relations, but as you know, we're currently having the SADC Summit within South Africa, and the President has called her in. But once she has concluded her meeting with the President, she said that she will try and make her way here. So apologies for that change in the program. But let's get the day started with our first panel discussion. This first panel discussion is the reflection of the intersection of critical mineral governance, regional peace and security, utilizing the Mozambique situation, along with broader regional experiences as the foundational basis for that analysis. And today we've invited an illustrious panel. Yeah, so part of that is this illustrious panel that we have convened today from across the region, including in Mozambique, to appropriately deliberate on what has happened in Mozambique, along with other regional dimensions. As you know, the SADC Heads of State Summit itself places the issue of critical minerals as the core towards our regional industrialization and development. And part and parcel of that is making the issues around critical minerals to issues around regional value chains, regional integration, trade, and human rights. But how we define it as a civil society and as the SADC community is a very critical point that we need to join and deliberate on now in order to inform a future where issues around extractivism does not rely on colonial underpinnings towards our economies. Historically, what has happened is that we used to just simply, there we go, apologies for that, I was using my shops to work. My son, much better. Much better, thank you so much. So as we know, the issue of critical minerals is a two-bladed sword. One, we stand at risk of replicating colonial extraction methods, where we take our mineral resources and ship them out. But at the same time, there's a major push towards beneficiation within the continent, especially at a regional level. That type of beneficiation is also very important because we don't want a situation where we take our raw materials and we just create steel and iron and then we ship them off. Yeah. We need to create industries within our region in order for us to develop. We have seen recently there's a current economic crisis that's emerging within the region. Issues around unemployment, poverty, and inequality still persist within this region. And in order for us to move forward in a manner that does not replicate colonial patterns of development, we have to have important discussions. A new element has arisen within the discussion around critical minerals, and that's the rise of conflict. Conflict is a result of exploitation of mineral resources without beneficiating of the people on the ground. Conflict is a result of creating instability in order for you to lower the cost of doing business and other aspects of it. But we have an illustrious panel that will greatly intervene in this manner. I'd like Josie to come. Josie. And part of us, as everyone was on the audience and our thing. So I would like to bring on Professor Adiado Novunga, Executive Director of CGT, to come to the stage. Give him a round of applause as he comes on board. Very good, man. It's fun listening. And I would like to bring on Ms. Maura Martins, Executive Director of MASC. Maura. I'd like to bring on Ms. Fadilia Chimani. So like Fidelia Chimane, Executive Director of CESC. Bishop Rodriguez Julio Dambo, Chairperson of CCM. Dr. Mobile Kaba, Program Manager of Resources Futures in Africa, OSF. Dr. Kamaso Kabwe, Program Manager of Southern African Resource Watch.
We did explore shares.
Apologies, the stage is not as you know, this is a regional conversation, and we will have completion services provided by them. Thank you so much. Jonathan, you may join us. Right. Give Jonathan a round of applause because he's going to have to. Right. So I'll start with Professor Adjani Mubera to begin his opening remarks concerning the situation in critical mineral, reflecting on the situation in Mozambique and how we manage this situation going forward.
Thank you. Good morning. Thank you for convening us here today, this morning, in the margins of the SALO meeting taking place here in Devon. I mean, we are here to discuss critical minerals, governance, and regional peace and security. As I was growing up, a young boy from the village. Every young boy in Mozambique, in Eswatini, Zimbabwe, Zambia, Malawi, as Yugu Masigela would say, they were all about getting a training. Where to? Journey to the mines. So the story of Saturn was a story of the gold mines in South Africa. We were all converting. Then Yugu Masigela would go on and sing that Stimela legendary song. Today there is no more theology. There is no more Yugu Masigela singing. That is gone. You come here to South Africa to where the mines were. You see that the Chinese are taking over. So the disruption of our region, it is there in our eyes. Chinese are taking over. And this has serious implications in the SADC regional agenda. What can we really do together as a nation? And taking it from a critical minerals perspective and learning from what is happening in Mozambique, my home country. I mean, there are three important topics that need to be looked at. The first and the most important is that mineral governance in the region. It is now a regional security because it brings three important topics. One is geopolitics. External powers, as Mjoz was saying, since the Berlin conference, they are competing for access, offtake, infrastructure, and influence. So it's no more about all converging in Johannesburg. What we see are superpowers competing for access to those resources. So the geopolitics, the regional economy, where processing, corridors, and standards determines who gets the value. As we are speaking here, there is a corridor being developed to extract the resources from DRC all the way to the sea. And from the sea, that is not going to Malawi, not going to, it is going somewhere else. We don't even know where it's going. Then there is aspect of human security, the land, livelihoods, illicit markets, and coercive response, which affects the legitimacy of the state. And in a context where the state was not there to study. And we often talk about critical minerals. The critical aspect is not about geology, it's about power. And Frantz Fanon, we are familiar with Frantz Fanon. he would say the story of critical minerals. It is not our story. That's not our story. It is a story of some other people elsewhere that have decided that there is something that they call critical mineral. We are like rushing to catch a truck that is already kind of passing. Yeah, we are running to catch a truck and to make sure that we don't get the dust. And we can be comfortably seated in that truck. In all these conversations, comrades, my friends, it is not about driving the agenda. It's about a space in that agenda set somewhere else. We don't even know. So this is not our story, as it is not was our story coming from the Berlin conference. So, taking it from a Mozambique perspective, Mozambique is a regional security junction, not only a mining location. Why is that so? I mean, borderlands. Mozambique borders with Tanzania, with Malawi, Zimbabwe, and South Africa. Funny enough, in Mozambique, Mozambique is home to one of the biggest gas reserves in the world. And that the geology of our gas, it is shared with the geology of the Tanzanian gas. But Mozambique and Tanzania are not talking. Mozambique is talking to some other people. Tanzania is talking to some other people. And I'm not saying this is the reason why in Mozambique we have a conflict and in Tanzania there's no conflict. So you start to understand, to see some of the elements, energy of why this topic is not only important, but it is timely. Corridors, the Nacala corridor, the Beira corridor, the Maputo corridor, the Northern corridor. When we had the post-election protests, I mean, we talked about this. We saw the South African leadership coming to Maputo, but it was not about helping Mozambique set things right. It was about unlocking the Maputo corridor to allow the trucks to go to the port. So it was not about setting things right. So we cannot build energy agenda in a context of that governance. That has to be set right. But I'm not yet there. Minerals, belts, graphite, sands, tantalum, lithium, yet in fragile territories. All these in fragile territories. Cabo Delgado and related districts. I mean, look at Cabo Delgado. In 2013, Christine Lagarde, the then IMF director, came to Maputo in that iconic Africa Rising conference. She said Mozambique would be the next Qatar of Africa and would be the drive of energy markets in our continent. We're all there to applaud. We're so happy to see that. And he said Mozambique would be a lower middle income country in the next 10 years. There's been 10 years now. Mozambique is worse than Haiti. Not only that, but Mozambique is risking regional security. Because if Mozambique fails, the whole region will fail. South Africa will not be safe. We share the same maritime. We share all these corridors. So, energy and mineral governance is, in another terms, a regional policy security policy. Cabo Delgado is a warning against the enclave security. You go to Cabo Delgado today, they are the best armies, the best Rwandese, the best this, the best that. Yet it is not secure. Yes, yet it is not safe. More importantly, the very same ways that President Ramaphosa said the day before yesterday that he was ashamed that we talk of regional integration, but we have issues around attacking on other Africans and so on and so forth. I'm afraid from being in Mozambique. Yet, my comrades, 5 years ago, we told SADC, military deployment for Mozambique, SAMIM, to go back home and stay there with the Rwanda Defense Force. So we made the choice to remain with the Rwandese, a tiny nation in Eastern African region, and told our own comrades from the region that have made the sacrifice to deploy. It is the very first time that SADC is deploying a military force to help a member state deal with a major security threat. But we told them, we don't want you. Go back home. And we remained with the Rwandese. Who determined who stays and who leaves? Do you think it was Maputo? No, this was decided somewhere else. Somebody else decided it's more important to have an external force from the region than to have our own brothers and sisters who help us support our mineral security. So the issue around, I'm not saying here that extractives in Cabo Delgado are the reason why we have the conflict. But that is not a neutral backdrop to what's happening in Cabo Delgado. I mean, mineral wealth everywhere, it creates expectations which are met. The issue around exclusion, displacement that breaks livelihoods, land access, and something that we often overlook, that displacement, it disrupts local institutions, local peace institutions, community leaders, and ancestral ways of leadership. It is disrupted in ways that it creates other layers of tensions. Militarize the response. In Cabo Delgado, you have the best armies I've said, yet it's not secure. Why? Because it's a militarized response to a conflict which is not merely a military, but it's a governance failure sort of conflict, triggered by unmet expectations, triggered by regional disparities, and so on and so forth. So across Southern Africa, the mineral changes, but the patterns remain. You look at DRC, cobalt, Zimbabwe, lithium, Zambia, DRC, the copper belt, South Africa, manganese, and other, these very same problems. Don't forget that 20 plus years ago, we had here in South Africa, I mean, that situation, the Marikana situation. We have so many Marikana situations in our continent. Yet across the region, there was complete silence over what happened there. And in Mozambique, the graphite sense in such a conflict-sensitive area. So mineral crime in our region, it becomes a regional security economy. What do we need there? We need what I call a peace-sensitive mineral compound, which needs 5 guarantees. One is voice. In terms of prior, and continuous community participation, value, local ownership, jobs, supplies, and regional processing. visibility, open contracts, licensing, ownership, revenue, and transfers. In my own country, people they talk about World Sovereign Fund as a mechanism to address the issues around disparities, etc. But most of these schemes, sovereign funds, they reproduce the same failed and broken governance mechanism that we've seen before. We need a remedy, independent grievance mechanisms, compensation, and more importantly, access to justice and rights-based security, public and private security meeting key standards. We need a community peace dividend, which must be visible and early across our region. Communities, it's an outcry. Communities don't see the benefits where livelihoods and not only disrupted, but it is captured by the elites. So the action agenda is national, regional, and global. From national jurisdictions, SADC, African Union, and the global markets. I conclude by saying something else. A clean energy future cannot be built on debt governance. It is the legitimacy of the institutions that govern this world. So the strategic resource is not the critical minerals alone. It is how good is that governance to enable the regional linkages, as I've talked about, geopolitics, issues around the corridors, and issues around trade in the region. How good are the regional institutions to force that? And we are happy to hear that South Africa is taking the leadership, and we are looking forward to see how South Africa will steer that process forward, learning from the current mistakes, but also not being shy for what is happening out there in terms of migration dynamics, etc. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. As usual, very comprehensive and important remarks into grounding us for this discussion, and an overview of not just Mozambique, but the region itself, and a bit of an important history as well. But we want to get a deep dive inside Mozambique. And for the next 3 speakers, I want to end this panel with Dr. Nobile, but I want to start with the colleagues from Mozambique. And here you will have to be patient. How many of us can we introduce? One, two, very few. I'll ask this conference to speak in Portuguese so that we can force ourselves to learn. We have to learn. Just joking. We have abused my little brother Jonathan. You tried to give us a bit of interpretation. We have challenged the session of interpretation and all that. And I hope that colleagues will understand. So,
How will you
yeah, the speaker and the speakers. Are you guys good? So Jonathan and Prof will do that. So Jonathan, you're not alone. So Prof can also help. So I want to take the pleasure of bringing my sister, Maura Martins, who is with one of the key organizations in Mozambique, the core face of trying to share the kind of the Mozambique they would want to see. And so she is with MASC. She has a team, a very competent team at MASC. And Maura, I know you have prepared the presentation, and I will ask you to cut it. It was 15 minutes. Cut it to 10, and take us into Mozambique. Where are we? Prof gave us a helicopter view of where things are. What are the issues? What lessons can we learn? What are the expectations as South Africa takes over the chairship? Is there a role for the region to play in the Mozambican issues?
Very much. Everyone. My name is Maura, and I'd like to say thank you to SALO for inviting me for this meeting and the opportunity to share our reflection about these important issues. Let's change to Portuguese now. A Fundação Márcia é uma organização moçambicana que trabalha em duas áreas temáticas. A primeira com grande meta, desenvolvimento de capacidade, e a segunda, empoderando comunidades. E é mais sobre esta componente, do empoderamento, da participação, da boa governação e justiça social, na qual vou alinhar a minha apresentação, para trazer reflexões sobre recursos minerais críticos ao nível local, em particular a experiência moçambicana.
So Maura, maybe just a few lines, and then Jonathan will, is that okay? Or Prof?
Great. Morning, everyone. My name is Marlon, and I'm the executive director for MASC, that is the civil society support mechanism organization in Mozambique. Our organization works in two main fields. The first is by grant making, and the second is working directly with communities in Mozambique. So my presentation will go around governance and social justice.
Vou abordar de forma breve, creio que o professor Adriano Vunga parte das questões já levantou, mas penso que como transição para o que quero falar, preciso mesmo de partilhar 3 elementos-chave. Olhando para os minerais críticos, as suas oportunidades, riscos e implicações estratégicas.
Yes.
Dizer que vou partilhar na minha apresentação, começando por olhar as 3 áreas críticas dos minerais críticos, nomeadamente a oportunidade, riscos e implicações estratégicas.
So I will start by sharing the work that we've been undertaken in 3 main fields, and then talk about the risk and the opportunities in critical minerals governance.
Quero só refrisar, que foi realmente já levantado, que a crescente procura global pelos minerais críticos cria uma oportunidade histórica para a África, mas os benefícios dependerão da qualidade da governação, da capacidade de criar valor global local e da gestão dos riscos para a paz e segurança.
So I would like to underline that the critical minerals create opportunities, but these opportunities, if you want to take on it, we should, they depend exclusively on the quality of governance, yes, and peace and security.
Se olharmos para a visão africana de mineração, ela pressupõe uma África com uma economia baseada na mineração sustentável, inclusiva e orientada para o desenvolvimento.
So if we look into an African point of view, it goes oriented by sustainable and
inclusiva e orientada para o desenvolvimento.
Yes, goes around sustainability and development-oriented approach.
E propõe 5 elementos fundamentais. O primeiro é que é transformar os recursos minerais em desenvolvimento sustentável e não apenas em receitas de exportação.
So the first one of the 5 key pillars, the first one is to transform critical minerals into
desenvolvimento sustentável e não receitas de exportação.
So to be oriented in a sustainable development approach and not just to profit from it.
Aumentar o valor acrescentado local, promovendo o processamento, industrialização e cadeias de valor africana.
To increase and the second one is to increase the added value.
Promovendo o processamento, industrialização e cadeias de valor.
So the second one is to promote value added and to, yeah, sorry guys, I am a little bit nervous. Yeah. It is,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
Dizer que a AMV pressupõe alguns pontos importantes que são, nomeadamente, aumentar o valor acrescentado local, promovendo processamento, industrialização e cadeia de valor africanas.
So she's saying critical minerals entails 4 important stages. The first is the negotiation, industrial policy,
Processamento, industrialização e cadeia de valor.
processing and value chains.
Fortalecer a governação e a transparência dos recursos minerais.
Secure the transparency of natural resources.
Promover o desenvolvimento econômico inclusivo, emprego e oportunidades para jovens e mulheres.
Promote local beneficiation, which include youth benefiting of jobs, also creating value at the community.
Contudo, esta lei não explicita como é que esta exploração dos recursos naturais, minerais, pode interagir com insegurança, deslocamento, exclusão e economias ilícitas.
Yet, there is a juncture, but there is no proper communication as to how these benefits link with the issues around illicit economies, issues around the governance deficit of the whole.
Em Moçambique, baseado nesta lei africana, também atualizamos as nossas leis. Neste momento, foi atualizada a lei de Minas, a lei de gás e petróleo e a lei do conteúdo local. São 3 principais instrumentos de reforma na legislação ligada aos minerais críticos.
Mozambique is ongoing legislative reform, the mining law, the petroleum law, and the local content laws that have been updated.
E estas 3 representam uma reforma do quadro legal que tem uma orientação comum: reforçar a soberania do Estado, aumentar a participação nacional, promover a industrialização e assegurar maiores benefícios para Moçambique e para as comunidades.
And all these reform, it aims at amplifying local, national benefit in Mozambique.
Mas a grande questão permanece: será que ter um quadro legal robusto é suficiente para garantir a riqueza dos recursos e que esta se transforme em desenvolvimento local?
So she's making an interrogation just to have these reforms enough to boost national benefit and local beneficiation.
E aí a questão entra para o território. Onde é que estão os recursos e onde é que estão as necessidades?
And there's an issue of territorial issues. Where are the resources and where the need is?
Em Moçambique, várias províncias onde se encontram os recursos naturais são também onde têm níveis altos de pobreza e vulnerabilidade.
In Mozambique, where mining regions are most impoverished, the ones most in need.
Cabo Delgado evidencia este paradoxo. Tem riquezas em recursos naturais, mas há muita pobreza, fragilidade, conflitos.
Cabo Delgado is the example when resources are massively yet the development poverty of local populations.
E caso concreto deste desafio é transformar esta riqueza em desenvolvimento, coesão social e segurança.
And challenges home those potential benefit for local populations.
Não vou acrescentar a questão da potencialidade e a localização geográfica de Moçambique, foi muito bem explicada pelo professor, mas que nos dá toda a possibilidade de melhor gerir, se a governação assim o fizer, esta situação paradoxal em Cabo Delgado.
She will not delve into details because I've looked at that earlier, but the paradox is there that needs to be looked at.
De forma cronológica, podemos ver que de 2010 a 2014 foram as descobertas dos recursos na bacia do Rovuma. Em 2017, o início da insurgência armada. Em 2021, o ataque à Palma e a entrada das forças da SAMI e também do Ruanda.
And it has been 9 years ago. It has been 9 years since in parallel to the discovery of wealthy-class gas reserves and insurgency started in northern Mozambique, Cabo Delgado, and we saw Mozambique trying to respond, then inviting Samim, Rwandese force that are all there trying to help contain the expansion of the paramilitarism.
Em 2024, os protestos associados já antes existiam queixas sobre ressentimento em Balama, foram associados a estes protestos à questão das manifestações pós-eleitorais. E em 2026, Moçambique aprofunda a cooperação com a China em minerais críticos de segurança.
Years ago, we had Mozambique's biggest post-election protests following challenging election that we had, and now Mozambique deepens the partnership with China for the exploration of Mozambique's critical minerals.
Então, o Cabo Delgado mostra-nos que a segurança e o desenvolvimento não são agendas sequenciais. A segurança humana, a inclusão e a coesão social são condições para que a exploração dos recursos gere desenvolvimento sustentável e não aprofunde a vulnerabilidade.
Cabo Delgado is a key example of how these agendas of exploration of natural resources and local development, they are not sequential. They have to go in tandem, or at best, social cohesion. It has to lay the foundations for a sustainable exploration of resources.
O desafio não é escolher entre segurança e desenvolvimento, mas construir modelo em que a exploração dos recursos minerais contribua para ambos.
So the idea is not to choose which peace and security or local development and security, but rather is to frame it in a way that one lays the foundation for the later.
Quando olhamos e vemos a partir de Moçambique para a região, quais são as oportunidades para uma governação integrada dos minerais? Começo por referir o protocolo da SADC que está em execução e considero que isto é uma oportunidade para a organização.
Looking at all these from a regional perspective, start by referencing SADC protocol, critical minerals, that it is being reviewed at the moment. This, according to us, is important issue.
Esta revisão que procura alinhar o quadro regional com a região com o Quadro Regional do Microvision, o Plano Estratégico Regional da SADC, e a Estratégia de Industrialização e as novas dinâmicas globais dos minerais, incluindo a transição energética.
As per the aims of the SADC government strategy, aims to align regional domestic strategies on how to harness these minerals for the benefit of regional and local.
Em contextos frágeis também, a utilização dos minerais deve antecipar riscos de conflitos. E aí temos que ter uma utilização sensível ao conflito.
The critical mineral governance has to be sensitive to issues around conflict with the aim of promoting peace.
O Plano Estratégico Regional da SADC coloca a paz, segurança e boa governação como fundamento da integração regional em articulação com a industrialização e a integração dos mercados.
Peace and security is the cornerstone of SADC framework of critical minerals with the aim of ensuring that peace and security are the outputs of mineral exploration.
A iniciativa regional liderada pela UNECA 2026-2031 também procura desenvolver cadeias de valor de minerais, de transição energética, ambientalmente responsáveis, inclusivas e transformadoras.
The UNECA initiative, which aims at harnessing the policy perspective, the continent's mineral wealth, is also an important drive that can help regional frameworks on the beneficiation.
A iniciativa responde a desafios como a linha limitada de beneficiação, as lacunas de governação ambiental e social e a participação ainda insuficiente das comunidades de mulheres e jovens.
NECA strategy, it aims at addressing issues around social, environmental costs, as well as the youth benefiting for minerals from industrial.
Esta legislação nos mostra que há uma oportunidade para reforçar a coordenação regional.
This legislative reform highlights the potential for regional cooperation.
Há oportunidade para criar uma abordagem mais integrada que articule recursos minerais, industrialização, desenvolvimento territorial, segurança e coesão social.
There is an important opportunity to integrate social cohesion, regional integration, local populations.
E esta agenda, e esta cimeira assim mostra, está a ganhar centralidade na SADC.
This agenda is shown by the summit, gaining momentum in the region.
Como é que nós, como Fundação MASC, trabalhamos estas questões na realidade local? Vou passar a apresentar algumas lições da Fundação MASC em programas com a indústria extrativa em Cabo Delgado.
Yeah, and now share MASC's experiences working with strategy.
Entendemos que é no território que as políticas, os investimentos e as relações entre Estado, empresas e comunidades se tornam realidade.
The territory where issues around extractive communities, local beneficiation become reality.
E é também aí que surgem ou que podem ser prevenidos os conflitos.
It's also example of how, where,
5 lições que posso apresentar. A primeira, é preciso conhecer antes de agir.
5 lessons I can share. First, you need to know before that you
E nós fazemos, na nossa intervenção, uma análise da economia política,
that with the political economy analysis before.
no território para compreender os interesses, o poder, os conflitos existentes. E esta análise informa a nossa intervenção, também informa os tomadores de decisão.
This analysis informs the intervention that was planned.
A segunda lição que tiramos é que é necessário dar voz e poder às comunidades.
Second lesson that a voice and power for local governments.
Através de informação, de capacitação, de criação de espaços de participação. Quando a comunidade está mais informada, ela também é mais capaz de dialogar e de agir.
Must be building resourcing them because it's for the experience when communities are better informed, they give more active.
A terceira lição é recuperar e fortalecer os meios de vida das pessoas.
Third lesson is to recover the livelihoods for local populations.
Logo após o ataque que aconteceu em cima da praia de Palma, a Fundação Mastro esteve presente no terreno, um ano depois, e esteve envolvida em todo o processo de reassentamento e recuperação de meios de vida daquelas comunidades ao nível destes distritos. E aí, as ações básicas eram fortalecer os pequenos negócios, as iniciativas econômicas, para criar autonomia e resiliência comunitária.
Detailing on how after the time to Palma administration engaged with extensive work to rebuild people's livelihoods as a way to help them restore their lives and dignity.
Passo rapidamente pela quarta e quinta. A quarta seria construir pontes entre os atores, neste caso, comunidade, governo, empresa e sociedade civil, para fortalecer o diálogo. E a quinta lição que tiramos é prevenir o conflito e fortalecer a coesão social.
Fourth is around stakeholder civil society, communities, and the fifth lesson is around social cohesion. How to enhance
Como final, a lição que nós tiramos deste processo é que a prevenção do conflito começa antes da sua manifestação. Começa com comunidades informadas e participativas, decisões inclusivas e uma distribuição mais justa das oportunidades e benefícios dos recursos.
community prevention starts before the conflict starts. The communities involved, so the communities engaged, the community response to participate. Those.
Yeah, thank you, Maura. Thank you.
O que, mesmo para fechar, pensamos é que o que pode ser uma grande oportunidade para a SADC neste momento é transformar a agenda dos recursos minerais não apenas numa agenda de industrialização e crescimento econômico, mas também numa agenda de paz, inclusão e segurança regional.
So, as a final thought, this agenda decided which governance and security will not only be pushed around industrialization policies, but that should also be looking at decent security for the communities and of course.
Muito obrigada.
Thank you. Thank you, Maura, for your eyes. important experiences and lessons as well. And that's why this first session is about reflections, essentially. I want to quickly move to the second speaker. I know that we are using no talk, but we'll keep on using here. Let's move to my good friend Fidelia Tazani. She is the executive director of again an important organization in Mozambique, SES, and Fidelia is and you oh the podium.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So Fidelia, she has 10 minutes.
My
You have minutes.
More negotiations.
Six.
Comrade, I've seen it.
Okay. So good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning. Still morning. So good morning, everyone.
And sorry, you know that it's tea time. Please, one by one, if you feel like you want coffee for energy, just grab a cup of coffee. Not too many people on the. And then you just come and continue. We won't be able to take a break. I want to apologize for that. So please get a cup of coffee and let's continue the discussion.
So good morning again, colleagues and friends. Let me first start by thanking SALO for bringing us together. At a time when our democracies are under strain, and conflicts remain unresolved, and global competition for our resources is accelerating. I stand here convinced that there is something profoundly hopeful in the simple decision of people to meet and to listen and to confront difficult truths with and imagine a future together. That for me is the power of this People's Summit. It reminds us that SADC is too important to be discussed only between governments and behind institutional doors. As a region, it's not, the region is not built by treaty, by corridors, by markets, or mineral deposits alone. It becomes real when its people recognize one another, feel that they belong to a shared future, and assume responsibility for building it. I truly believe this is precisely where a reflection on critical minerals, governance, and regional peace and security must begin. Not with what lies in our soul, but with the people and the regional future these resources are meant to serve. I would then like to organize my reflections around three questions that seem key to me. I don't pretend to have complete answers, of course, but I offer these questions as an invitation to think together about who we are as a region, what we possess, and what we want our collective wealth to make possible. So no one can fully see an island, I imagine, while standing only within it. In the same way, none of our countries can fully understand its choices, vulnerabilities, and possibilities by looking only inwards. We need one another to see the region as a whole, and perhaps to see ourselves more clearly within it. So my first question would be, are we truly citizens of a region,
or still mainly citizens of countries that belong to the same regional organization. And I'm not raising regional citizenship as a philosophical diversion from economic integration. My conviction is that my conviction is that it's one of the human and political conditions for making integration real. Minerals may connect our economies, but only people can recognize a shared future and can build a region. SADC's own vision describes a peaceful, inclusive, and industrialized region in which all citizens enjoy well-being, justice, and freedom. But as this regional identity travels from institutions into consciousness and everyday lives of our people, language itself offers one of understanding this distance. One way I would say of understanding this distance. I do not see how a linguistic diversity has a problem to be removed. That's not the point here. It is part of who we are. It is part of our history. It's part of the entire process which made the borders the way they are. But we cannot speak or we cannot ask people to imagine themselves as regional citizens through conversations they cannot enter. Translation, as we did witness this morning, communication and mutual understanding are not administrative details. They are parts of the infrastructure of belonging. I need to promise you that I'm not making this argument merely to justify reading this long intervention in English and doing it outside my linguistic comfort zone. Although I hope this is a very good excuse to invoke a little regional solidarity and have additional 3 more minutes for this intervention. So language is only one part of a much deeper question. Do our people experience the region as a shared political and human community, or mainly as a marketplace through which goods, capital, and minerals can move? Allow me to ground this reflection in something that happened barely a month ago, and that we cannot ignore in this conversation, in a summit that we call people's faith. The resurgence of xenophobia. For me, it confronts us with an existential crisis as a region. It questions the foundations on which we claim to be building SADC and the history of solidarity that sustains our liberation struggles. I'm not suggesting that xenophobic violence results simply from a weak regional identity. Unemployment, inequalities, insecurity, and failures of governments also allow fear and resentment to grow. But when people who share history of struggle and mutual support begin to treat one another as intruders, we must then ask whether our regional project has reached the lives of our citizens. This is the contradiction, I would say, I find increasingly difficult to accept. We celebrate the movement of minerals, the investment in capital across our borders, while people from the same region are denied dignity, belonging, and sometimes even safety. A region, in my understanding, cannot be integrated based on what we have under our soil only, and through the corridors if it's not also integrated in our minds, rights, aspirations of its people? What kind of region are we then actually building? And what is where the conversation, and this is actually where the conversation about critical minerals truly begins. And this is how I want to go through my intervention. It drives me to question number 2. And that will be, do we understand what we have? Have we decided what we want it to build for us together in terms of shared prosperity, regional agency, and lasting peace? The language of critical minerals has entered our policy, it's true, with remarkable speed, but critical for whom? For Europe's energy security, Asia's industries, or another power technological leadership? What makes them critical to young people seeking dignified work? Or to a community living beside immersed health without reliable water, healthcare, or opportunity? I'm not questioning their global importance. I'm asking us to widen the definition of criticality. Surely a mineral must also be critical because it can build domestic enterprise, finance public service, and allow our people to imagine a more secure future. And I myself, I find myself increasingly aligned with African voices inviting us to confront an almost ritualized narrative that Southern Africa possesses an extraordinary abundance of critical minerals. We repeat it very often, but how well do we know what we have, where it is, in what quantities, and with what real economic potential? Our position is exceptionally strong in platinum group metals like cobalt, manganese, and graphite, but it's not equally dominant across all critical minerals. The largest estimated lithium reserves, for example, are found outside SADC and even outside Africa. I'm not saying this to diminish our potential. But for me, serious ambition requires accuracy. The deposit is not necessarily a viable reserve. A reserve is not production, and production does not give us control over processing, technology, markets, or value. Knowing what we have and understanding both its possibilities and its limits is important. It's the beginning of regional agency. Without that knowledge, we may continue negotiating access to separate deposits. With it, we can begin negotiating a shared proposition for regional development, industrialization, employment, and peace. Yet only very few SADC countries appear to have a dedicated critical mineral strategy. So South Africa and Zambia are one of the good examples. We may share geographical systems, corridors, and security risks while negotiating separately. The minerals under our soil may be regionally connected while the decisions above them remain fragmented. Will then our national strategies become building blocks of a regional proposition or competing offer the same investor? This brings me to another difficult truth. How countries do not enter these conversations from equal positions. We do not have the same infrastructure with energy, skills, industrial capacity, or negotiating power. Integration cannot be built by pretending that unequal countries are equal. The European experience, despite its imperfections, offers us one very useful lesson. Integration requires cohesion, solidarity, and I would also say sacrifice. No country, in my opinion, will bring everything to a regional value chain. Some may contribute with minerals, others with energy, others for processing, logistics, etc. There will be compromises. But sharing the costs of integration cannot mean creating permanent sacrificial countries, territories, or communities. Perhaps we have been mapping minerals too narrowly. What would we see if we map them alongside the energy, the water, the infrastructure, the knowledge, the industrial capacity that we need to transform them? Could we make one practical regional commitment, for instance, that selected minerals undergo at least initial transformation within Southern Africa? If the producing country were available or through an arrangement that distributes value fairly, this alone would not resolve youth unemployment, of course, but it could create space for skills, local enterprise, and technology transfer, and test whether integration responds to problems of our people, of our people's actual experience. I ask with I'm bringing this knowing that I'm someone who is not mining specialist and being optimist, but as someone who still believes deeply in Mozambique, in the region, and Africa. And this conviction is not mine only. It has grown in spaces like this by listening to Africans equally unwilling to accept that our resources should create more value elsewhere than in our people's lives. Perhaps regional possibility begins here, imagining together what appears impossible when each country acts alone. For Mozambique, however, this is not an abstract reflection. Our experience shows why the governance of natural resources can be separated from peace and security. In Texas, coal attracted major investment, yet many families experienced resettlement, disrupted livelihoods, and a painful distance between the wealth leaving their land and the development entering their life. Cabo Delgado tells us a different story and far more complex. I do not equate the two or suggest that the resource alone pose the conflict. But no serious reading can ignore the convergence of extraordinary health with poverty, exclusion, youth, unemployment, and territorial inequality. Extraction does not produce conflict itself, it's true, but it can deepen its conditions when communities lose land without gaining security, when young people see investment without opportunity, when wealth lives without creating a credible local future, and the problem then becomes a fracture between citizens, the state, and the development project itself. Critical minerals can therefore become a platform for industrialization, can become a platform for industrialization, dignified employment, regional urgency, and peace. They can also produce a familiar pattern in which values live, inequality grows, and communities carry the loss. Geology, as Mvunga said, gives us possibility. Government will determine which of those futures we choose. My third and final question is then, what kind of governance can turn critical minerals into shared power inclusive development, and lasting peace. We are having this conversation while an increasingly multiple, in an increasingly multipolar world. The European Union, the EU is advancing investment and connectivity through the Global Gateway Strategy. China is linking infrastructure and trade with industrialization and processing, and the United States and its partners are focusing on corridors and supply security. I mentioned these not to compare them, of course, but because each is organizing clearly around its own interests. Others increasingly know why our minerals are critical to them, but the question for me is whether we are equally clear about why they must be critical to us. This is where governance matters. Not only has laws and it has institutions, but has a culture of integrity, transparency, and accountability that determines who holds power, whose interests count, and where the communities can shape the future being built around them. An enabling environment cannot simply open the door for investment to enter and minerals to live. It must also open space for communities to organize, to negotiate, and to benefit, for domestic enterprise to grow, for institutions to defend the public interest, and for civil society to speak without fear. And participation in this scope is not permission granted after decisions have been made. Communities must have information, protection, and power to say yes or no, to propose another path, and to imagine their future with confidence. This conviction is shaping CES's strategic choice. We do not see critical minerals as an end, or extraction as the center of development. We see their governance as an entry point into a greater ambition, inclusive development, democratic state, and the democratic state grounded in social justice and lasting peace. We have developed a method around this conviction, and we are now testing on a small scale. It's not complete, but neither it's not only an idea. It grows from how we work with community affected by land and resource decisions, citizens following public money into services, women and young people organizing to influence public choices, and broad coalitions defending civic space. These experiences have taught us that participation does not automatically become evident. I need 3. Okay. Okay, so this has taught us something fundamental about peace. Grievance do not disappear when people are prevented from expressing themselves. They deepen, on the contrary. And civic space is therefore not separate from critical minerals. It is where communities can expose injustice, demand correction, and help prevent grievance and becoming from becoming crisis. I have a few more things to say, but I will jump very quickly to a second part of my last question. And this would again take me back to Mozambique. And the reason why is because I'm here, also representing this commission, National Commission, which was created in Mozambique to try to solve the crisis in which we are involved. And about this, I would like to say that the process, I hope you are familiar with what I'm talking about. I would like to say that the process is still underway. So I speak about its methodology and achievements with caution, and only in terms of, so I'm not talking about the results, but only about its potential. So the crisis was electoral in Mozambique, but what brought us where we are was much deeper. And I will jump then to the end to state that what people are asking in Mozambique is not abstract. They want to see development on the plate, in the hospital, in dignified employment, and in the possibility of building prosperous life. What we want in Mozambique is protected rights, institutions that we can trust, and a genuine voice in shaping the country's future. We carry disappointments, it's true, but this remains an important opening for Mozambique. And civil society is helping to shape peace and to call, and civil society is doing its role, helping to shape peace. So finally, and I'm jumping the parallel, perhaps this too is part of a regional citizenship agenda, or should be part of the regional citizenship agenda, confronting our demons at home, while we recognize that the peace of each country is part of the security of us all. And for this journey, it's important to understand that critical minerals are not the main factor, not even the critical issue, but the opportunity, or I would say better, the entry point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think that deserves a strong clapping. Let's do that. The only person who will not be able to do that is me, because she took too much time. But everyone knows this was comprehensive, this was important, and I think that we are able to see into what organizations are actually doing to address many of the challenges that we are facing across the region individually. And hopefully by the end of this process, we are able to say, when we find the connections with what we are doing individually so that we can amplify it collectively. How does the Mozambican story become our story too in our own local issues? And how would our story become their story too in their own local initiatives? And I think that that is important. She gave us very important points that I hope that during the discussion they will come to the fore. But the importance of really thinking about who we are becoming as a region, what prisons we want to see this region in terms of moving forward, what grounds our philosophical views of what we want to become. And I think that also I want to emphasize that there were presentations that were prepared by all of them. They will be shared together with the outcome of this meeting. So even the things that she skipped, will still be able to interact with that. This is not the end of the discussion. This is the beginning of a process as we want to say of building consensus together, finding each other and moving forward. I want to quickly jump. It's we cannot have these discussions and not bring people that are in the religious sector, particularly in Mozambique, because we know the role that the church and the Islamic groups in Mozambique have played, pushing for peace, both in Cabo Delgado, but even post the 2024-2023 election violence. So we have a very important voice from Mozambique, Bishop Dambo. And I think that we want to give you, Bishop. I was giving others, the last person I gave 6 minutes. I want to give you 6.5 minutes because your voice is important. And where is the church in all this? As we reflect on the critical minerals, as we reflect on peace and security of this region, where does the church sit? What is to be done? Thank you, Bishop. And I will abuse Prof. Luvunga again. Thank you.
Bom dia.
Good morning.
Obrigado por esta oportunidade que nos é dada.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Vamos resumir a nossa apresentação em 1h30.
Short our presentation. 1 hour and a half.
O Moçambique, depois das crises que nós tivemos,
In Mozambique, after the crisis we had,
os líderes religiosos criaram a iniciativa Moçambique para mim.
established an initiative called Mozambique First.
Moçambique primeiro inclui cristãos, islâmicos, hindus, rastafaris, bahai, todos estão mesmo nesta iniciativa.
This Mozambique First platform, so inclusive Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Rastafarians, you name them, they are all there.
E buscamos aquilo que é comum entre nós
What is common among ourselves,
e não aquilo que nos diferencia
and not what differentiates us.
em termos de fé, em termos de pessoa e tudo isso.
In terms of faith, people, and all that.
E o objetivo é promover a paz e a tolerância,
And the objective is to promote peace and tolerance,
responder aos problemas sociais de forma unificada.
respond to social problems that
De forma unificada.
fight front,
E colocar Moçambique em primeiro lugar.
and place Mozambique in first.
E os recursos que Moçambique tem também beneficiarem Moçambique primeiro.
Its resources to benefit Mozambique first.
E também este movimento é para prevenir o radicalismo, fanatismo com base na fé.
And this movement is aimed to prevent fanatism, radicalization through faith.
Então, temos 3 elementos importantes:
Three important elements:
desarmar a mente,
disarm the mind,
desarmar o coração
disarm the heart,
e desarmar a boca.
and disarm the mouth.
Então, não vamos entrar em detalhes, vamos apresentar isto de forma resumida realmente, devido ao tempo.
Not details, just some summarized.
E quando nós olhamos para a questão dos recursos,
When we look at the resources issue,
não olhamos apenas para a questão legal e para a questão econômica,
we don't focus only on the legal and economic aspects,
mas para a questão moral.
the morality aspect of it.
Então, é aí quando nós olhamos o mundo.
That's where we place our focus.
Então, treinamos líderes
Train leaders
para, a todos os níveis, para o processo de reconciliação, pacificação e exploração sustentável dos recursos.
that promote peace and sustainable exploration of resources. All that.
Promovemos diálogos comunitários, nós chamamos de rodas de conversa.
Dialogue, call them rounds of talks.
Como dissemos que a questão dos recursos é uma questão moral, defendemos que a educação é uma ponte.
As you said, that resources and moral, that education is a bridge.
Bom, os desafios neste âmbito temos a dependência de extração bruta,
Challenges, dependency on the raw extraction,
as assimetrias institucionais,
the institutional asymmetries,
a exclusão da mineração artesanal.
the exclusion of artisanal mining.
Então, aquilo que são lições de Moçambique que podemos partilhar aqui
The lessons from Mozambique.
é a religião tem a responsabilidade de ser uma voz de consciência e ponte de diálogo.
Religion has the responsibility to be a voice of consciousness and bridge of dialogue.
Contribuir para que a dignidade humana não seja ameaçada ou destruída com a exploração dos recursos.
So that the human dignity is not destroyed because of natural exploration.
A religião deve contribuir para a construção da paz, isto é, prevenção de conflitos.
Religion is to promote peace and prevent conflicts.
E quando falamos de reformas legislativas,
And when we talk about legislative reforms,
nós dissemos a lei não deve proteger os recursos e não proteger os recursos naturais e não proteger os recursos humanos.
we defend the view that law should not protect natural resources at the expense of the people.
Aqui só para fazer parênteses, saindo da mineração, indo para a questão florestal,
For an exemplification, moving from natural resources to forestry.
tivemos uma comunidade, acho que em Oman, em que reclamavam que, olha, se matar animal na reserva, a punição é grave. Mas aquele que mata homem já não tem a mesma punição.
So it's given an example of a community somewhere in Nyambara province where local communities are not protesting, but are not happy with the fact that in the reserve, the game reserve, when you kill an animal, you are so severely punished. But when a human being murders another human being, he's almost let go free.
Então, para o movimento Moçambique Primeiro,
For the movement of Mozambique first,
a questão moral é em primeiro lugar.
the morality issue comes first.
As leis não são suficientes se não estivermos moralmente preparados para isso.
Laws are not enough if we are not morally prepared for that.
A extração e a exploração mineira poderá significar muito para alguns e nada para outros.
Natural resource exploration and extraction can mean a lot for so small and nothing for many.
E neste grupo de religiosos que nos juntamos, dissemos, se tudo fizermos por amor a Moçambique, podemos prevenir conflitos.
And in the group, they say is if they do all what it takes with love, they can prevent conflict in Mozambique.
E para fazer o mesmo discurso em inglês, para não terminar,
So it should finish.
thank you.
Yeah, that's why I like the bishop. He only doesn't give us a sense of where the church is. He does that all the time. So I'm hoping that the second panel is an important place. If you can't follow the name of God, would you follow? Thank you, Bishop. And Bishop is the chair of the Mozambique Council of Churches, also the Methodist Church. So a very important voice in the development in Mozambique. I want us to learn this session, and there is no better voice to learn it than my sister Novina, who is a program manager with So Novina is with the Resource Futures in Africa from the Open Society Foundation. And we know, I think it was Fidelia who gave us a clear picture that the issue of resources have to be put in their proper context. is not just a Southern Africa issue. It is a global issue. The competing interests are not just national or regional. They are also very global. If we are not careful, as we have had throughout this morning, the decisions on the resources in our region will be made in Washington, will be made in London, will be made in Paris, without us sitting on the table. And I think that's the struggle, that how do we find voices at the table? And philanthropy plays an important role. And organizations like the Open Society, we have been at the center of supporting many of us in pushing for the kind of an agenda that is community-based, that is inclusive, are important to hear from. And so maybe it would be important to get a sense of where are we from the way you look at it as the resource futures in Open Society. How do you look at this topic? What can we do as civil society, as non-state actors, to ensure that this debate and ultimately policy is grounded on community needs, on citizens' needs, rather than deals between the elites? Now we move forward. Please, you have 6 now.
Thank you, Program Manager, and good morning, everyone. My name is Nwabile Laga. I'm the Programs Manager of Foundations based in Johannesburg, as introduced. So Open Society Foundations is a philanthropic private fund that supports a number of civil society organizations, states, and other actors that work on a number of issues really globally. So we are a global foundation. I think from yesterday and today's sessions, we have laid the foundations in terms of what the continent actually has in terms of the mineral resources. But I think one of the important things that we often emphasize is that, firstly, we should not, as the continent, confuse our geological mineral resource endowment with developmental success, right? So the minerals that we have on the ground will not necessarily translate to development without action from ourselves. So because we have experienced this commodity boom before, and we have long supplied the world with these strategic resources, but they have not transferred or translated to prosperity, democratic deepening, peace, as well as economic transformations. And instead, the continent continues to export the raw materials and import finished products, and remaining trapped in the lowest end of the critical mineral value chains. And therefore, the challenge really that stands before us is not whether we possess these critical minerals, but is whether we possess the right governance systems, the institutional imagination, the political courage, as well as the collective visionary that is necessary to transform these mineral resources into economic development and prosperity. Secondly, critical minerals also are fundamentally really a governance issue, especially in this continent, as we have seen a number of examples that have been mentioned by the colleagues on stage. Critical minerals sit at the intersection of democracy, accountability, conflict transformation, peace building, industrial policy, environmental justice, as well as economic sovereignty. Transparent institutions, accountable leadership, and meaningful citizen participation, and the rule of law are as important as ensuring that mineral wealth advances to public good. And the relationship between peace, critical minerals, and is not very clear or predetermined. as governance is one of the mediating factor, because where institutions are transparent, inclusive, and accountable, mineral resources can contribute to development and social cohesion. But where governance is weak, they exacerbate conflict, inequality, and instability, as we have seen and as we have heard from the experiences of Mozambique, the experiences of DRC, and it's not even limited to only those two countries. The experiences in the Sahel and Sudan is also deeply rooted in mineral resources. And therefore, effective governance is also a critical tool for preventing conflicts, particularly in resource-rich countries. Transparent, accountable, and inclusive management of these resources helps ensure that the revenues are distributed fairly, local communities benefit from the extraction, and that grievances related to land are addressed, environmental impacts are addressed, and economic exclusion is also addressed. Strong governance frameworks reduce opportunity for corruption, illicit trade, and financing of armed groups, while promoting trust between governments, companies, and citizens. And therefore, we need conflict-sensitive governance frameworks that integrate dialogue, prevention, mediation, inclusion, social cohesion into mineral governance. And from this perspective, the peace and security dimension lies in prevention of conflicts, where identifying where mineral development may interact with political exclusion, community displacement, environmental harms, cross-border smuggling, organized crimes, and other related grievances will escalate into violence and hence conflicts. And it is in this context that Opposition Foundations uses a transformative peace lens to complement the resources, futures, governance, and development by asking how dialogue, early warning, mediation, community agency, and conflict-sensitive governance can be built into mineral strategies from the onset. Also important to mention is the regional dimension, which my colleagues have also mentioned. So at OSF, we are looking beyond individual mining projects or national regulatory reforms towards the need for regional cooperation and African agency in the strategic value chains, because these critical minerals are embedded in cross-border economies. As the Prof had mentioned, the example of Mozambique and Uganda and Tanzania, where we know that the geology of minerals is not strictly limited to one country, right? So OSF's emerging view is that critical minerals governance must answer three interlinked questions: who controls the strategic resources, how the grievances and competition are managed, and whether mineral resources advances shared prosperity rather than insecurity. And therefore, the issue is not simply about better contracts and transparency. It's about whether Africa's minerals strengthen democracy, prevent conflicts, and expand sovereign development choices. Also, at Opposition Foundations, we believe in the role of the state. A developmental state must actively formulate the required legal and regulatory architecture and create the enabling microeconomic frameworks and incentivize the injection of public and private capital, invest in research, innovation, and skills development, as well as other transparency and accountable regimes. Also the importance, again, of non-state actors like we have in the room, who are the key drivers in building a movement that checks the excesses of the state and show accountability, driving the edge policy alternatives and protecting the rights of citizens. And increasingly a vibrant coalition of African civil society, think tanks, researchers, faith groups, academics, and labor unions is also required to reinforce the power development the power of developmental states in creating a new narrative for resources extraction on the continent. And in this context, Open Society Foundation in the continent has responded in three priorities or objectives that we look at. The first one, we look at how do we actually link critical minerals to the entire economy? How do we ensure, basically responding to the question of how do we add value to our critical minerals? And so that really looks at how do we take mineral ores to mineral processing, and that's into how do we develop critical mineral value chains within the continent for developmental priorities of communities and all citizens. Secondly, we look at how do we address human rights violations as well as the stewardship of the environment. As we know that mining is only expected to expand because of the increasing need of minerals for the energy transition, also for our own developmental needs. And so we need to ensure that mining can harmoniously coexist with communities as well as with the environment. And lastly, we look at how then do we increase the voices and agencies of local communities by strengthening critical mineral site linkages through localization of services and through how do we actually build the skills that are required for critical mineral economies. So, I mean, what we've seen in the field as a foundation in terms of what has not been adequately covered or funded over the years is really also around artisanal and small-scale mining, firstly, which is an issue that is mostly prevalent in the continent, as we know that informal mining is how some of the most vulnerable groups in the continent make their living, but there is a lack of either technical assistance or financing of artisanal and small-scale mining in the continent. And so that is an area that philanthropic capital is looking at deploying resources towards. I think we know that even employment, artisanal and small-scale mining employs about 45 million people globally, and most of those people sit within the African continent. And also, secondly, the issue of conflict and mining, the intersection thereof hasn't been well funded over the years, which is surprising as we have so much conflict in the continent, but there is very little funding that goes towards that. It's really looking at how do we think about these issues in an intersectional manner, in a multidisciplinary way, and not only focusing on one stream of the issue, particularly when it comes to minerals. So in terms of then covering what would it take for funders to look at how do we back a joint civil society agenda that is leveraging the regional bloc rather than fragmented country level grants or country level funding. I think over the past few years, we've seen a number of coalitions emerging, especially from the civil society community. So in terms of that side, and most of the coalitions that are emerging usually looks at coordination, right? But what philanthropy and what capital is looking for is not on coordination. It's really how do we coordinate ourselves in terms of really having an impact regionally, firstly, but secondly, and how that coalition or coordination structure impacts on policy, right? What are we pushing forward? We are not only looking at how are people coordinating, that is important, but we are now seeking and looking beyond that. How is that coalition affecting developmental outcomes within the region? So regional structures that seek to look beyond coordinating, but impacting policies and strategies are the important thing that capital is being deployed towards. I mean, this really looks at how we impact on policies that is related to advancing value chains, advancing transparency, advancing all the other aspects that we've heard about today and yesterday. But we are also looking at how we organize ourselves to demonstrate that, some governance problems are inherently regional. I think yes, many examples have been done today to show that the issues are very regional. If we have issues around geological data, knowing what is underground, most of these countries are sharing borders and so on and so forth. So the geological composition of the minerals underneath the ground is probably similar. So it is important that we coordinate effort towards aggregating our data that is related to what is on the ground. And that data is important towards enabling us to negotiate better. I think that is really a sum up of how philanthropy has looked at the issue, and I think obviously the African continent as the center of this issue is one of the priority focus for many funders at the moment. Thank you.
I think that's very important questions to ask ourselves, even as we engage in this topic of critical minerals. But as has been coming out throughout, is that the critical minerals debate or agenda is an end report into a bigger developmental governance issue. It will be tragic if we see it as an entity itself. And I think that comes out quite importantly. And the idea that the region, our problems are almost the same. They are similar. And governments share whether manipulation tactics and repression tactics. That's why we see that when something happens in Zimbabwe, quickly copied in the next country. It happens in Malawi, it's quickly copied in the next country. And the speed at which governments develop or share ideas should be what lessons that we take as non-state actors in civil society to collaborate, work together across national boundaries, the problem sharing. The issue of knowledge, I think that's very important. Without African knowledge, and not just Western knowledge, telling us both the qualitative and quantitative capacity of our resources underground, I think that will continue to move. So it's important that we invest in that, and I think Nobile brings that home quite clear. I abused Prof a lot. I know that there are Zimbabweans in the house. I hope to run for office at some point. I don't want to give me as a dictator. So I want Prof to have a few seconds just for the abuse I have
two small anecdotal notes. In 2006, they asked Commandante Marcos from the Chiapas, the leader in the Mexican area, when he was returning to the negotiation talks. And then he said, he will not return unless he has given a chance to participate in the making of the table. So not only a seat, but the making of the table itself. So in this conversation around critical minerals, it's not only about a seat for us. It's really the opportunity to shape the conversation, to cater for our needs. And our needs are still very basic, remember. It's about feeding our people, food for our people, and electricity for our people, education for our people. Is my second. Second, we will not have regional integration to be able to lead our critical minerals from a peace and security perspective if we don't have regional institutions that are funded domestically. So we have SADC that is sitting somewhere in Gaborone. Who is funding SADC to be able to steer the regional agenda? You see the heads of state coming here, etc. But they come here really to exhibit their most recent jets. And then they leave. There is nothing really pushing them. Do you think that in the EU, the heads of state in the EU, he or she can miss a meeting of the heads of state himself? You cannot. Because the EU in Europe, it's $120 billion euro institution. So if you miss that one, it means you will not be part of that big cake. Here, I don't know who pays the salary of the secretariat. Who pays for the African Union to convene to meet? I don't know, but I suspect it is not funded by us to serve our own agenda. So, comrade, this is civil society meeting. Huh? Yeah. We have to tackle these difficult questions about who is funding our regional institutions. Because incentive structures matter. Who pays for the song will tell you how to dance it, isn't it? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prof. I think very important reflections, very important questions, which we will not be able to answer today. But as we go throughout the year under South African situation, maybe a civil society will give us impetus on the kind of questions that we need to put on the table that we have constructed together. And so I think that benefited a lot. I don't want to spend much time. Are there any burning questions, burning inputs, like very brief, not another presentation, very brief. And as we do that, I want Dr. Capo to get ready. I want Samuel to get ready. Dr. Diaz, I want you to get ready. Jonathan, Tabo, and Gift to get ready and lend us in 30 minutes. It's 4 minutes each. So if you have prepared a 20-minute presentation, please add it to 3.5, then you will take it to 4. Let me start here.
Thank you very much. My name is Luke, and I'm so passionate about this because I think I wanted this all the time trying to push the agenda that we talk about. But I'm happy that most of the issues that we talk about in the background of what these are. But I've got one word that I need us to clear up from the onset, such that we won't miss it. The critical minerals report. That's not. But my number one word is how we define them. And then want to go and then have a regional approach when we ask the question, critical to who? So if we ask that from a national perspective, we're saying, these are critical to Zimbabwe. I don't know if that makes sense. Then we sit here and we want to have a regional approach. So I want us to be geared for an approach that then sinks into the veins of a national vision for Zimbabwe, meeting another national vision for Namibia. I don't want to talk about endowment, but let me talk about the change that happens after the budget, for instance. We need about 5 million of visionaries, Zimbabwe. Very important. But they are missing resources that are required to do one budget in Zimbabwe. And that's about 1.6 billion, according to the US estimates of how much you can. But my question is, if you look at it from that perspective, you find out you need a lot of water. Water. Why not quite a lot of water. And water is a very our number one challenge. You need a lot of electricity.
And again, that's our number two. They are always the one or two in that, depending on where you come. So my ideology of this check, I'm very happy the way you modeled it. We kept reminding us, so what did we take these guys there? That have already a picture of an industrialization of Africa. What is our take? What is that going to give them? Say, based on this industrialization vision, this is what we must say. If that can be clear to us, then we would at least have tried and we would like to see. Thank you.
Very important question. And we will need to, as civil society, I think advocacy lobbying without empirical evidence, without data, without numbers, will not be sufficient. Emotions alone will not take us where we want to go. We will need to have the numbers. And remember, it's not just critical minerals, also the issue of technology. The data centers will require massive amounts of power, massive amounts of water. And that's why I think Nobile kept saying that we cannot look at this as critical minerals issue alone. We have to have a systems thinking approach to the critical mineral issue. How does it fit into the entire chain? And the back to Frank. Why are only men speaking? Okay. All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lunga Mapuso. I'm from Suguma. The issue that Dr. raised earlier on is very detrimental because when you look at South Africa and Zimbabwe, even when we look at our history, Great Zimbabwe, Mapongo, there were smelters, Mwana Motepa, Mashonaland, Mateleland. So right now in South Africa, we've got programs whereby people, when they want to enter the mining space, there are learnerships and apprenticeships. We don't want that. We want to be part of the ecosystem, even if we are not mining ourselves, you know. We don't want to sit down and be part of an apprenticeship for 18 to 24 months. We want to be part of the ecosystem when it comes to mining. And right now, you cannot tell a young man like me that I need collateral of 5 million rand to start small-scale mining. Where am I going to get that? Am I going to have to sell my mother's house just to enter the mining space? We want to sit down and be part of the ecosystem. He mentioned water. There are hydroelectric dams in Mozambique, the Coparabasa hydroelectric dam. We want to be part of this ecosystem as young Black people. We want to be like China, where as a young Black man, you are holding my hand when I'm coming to you. And a Chinese young person or a young entrepreneur can walk into the state bank in China and say, this is my proposal, hold my hand, I will give you office space. This is what we propose. We don't want small-scale apprenticeships and learnerships. It's a waste of time because after that apprenticeship, someone is still going to sit down back at home. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. My name is Tinashe Kumbo from All Africa Conference of Churches. Mine is not a question, plus I just want to warn and also allege us, even this panel, but also the one that's going to come. I want to challenge us to see how best can we also link all what we've said to the discussion around climate injustice. My sister talked about the capital, the coordination. How can we force those who want to assist us in the coordination aspect to also amplify the discussion around climate injustice when we are discussing the critical minerals vis-a-vis issues of just energy transition, all those. So I want us to also amplify this discussion so that it is not lost along the way.
Okay. Greetings everyone. I'm from FEM and I'm also an artisanal miner. Then my question will be, the speakers talked about the beneficiation, the finances and the market, the xenophobia, the conflict or the gangsterism, which affects the sector ASL. So with regard to critical mineral, I just learned previously that in South Africa, there's 11 listed critical mineral. And mining dumps, I think it's one of them, whereby gold is being extracted and uranium. But as coming from mining affected, living at normal settlement affected by a chilling dam, which are not benefiting anything. It's owned by the Chinese and other people. And also the effect of chilling dams. We didn't get maybe the opportunity also to own our mineral. But we are saying through ASM, this is an opportunity to us as ASM or the community that are affected by tailings or mining to kind of get an opportunity to own our own mineral through ASM. But my question is, does this critical discussion talked about the ownership of community in terms of the mineral or the beneficiation for the communities or the ASM the communities? Thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Bon dia. Bon dia. I thought I should pay a privilege to our colleagues in Mozambique, but I see they are not even responding to their own language, and we were expected to actually listen. But it's a topic of another day. That's how Africa it is. My name is Tifuru Sintumure. I come from an organization called Consortium for Refugees and Migrants in South Africa. We normally work on issues of human mobility, more especially to make sure that we preserve life at whatever cost it may be across the region. So I'm sitting here and I get provoked by the conversation that we are having, especially from the panelists, and I should appreciate your deep insight and very comprehensive analysis. But the question that comes to my mind is, as I don't actually work on that space, but I interact with the space because I live in communities where this mining and mineral resource extraction is taking place, then my concern be, are the power holders consider us as the rights holders of these minerals and this mining? If so, do we have spaces as the rights holders to explore and exercise our rights as the rights holders of this mining and the minerals? If so, what is it that we need to start with as the rights holders? Because quite a number of time we speak about the politician that, the politician this, and which is correct and true reflection of what is happening. But we, as the rights holders, are we having spaces to actually utilize and analyze and get ourselves and our voices heard within those spaces? Are the spaces available? If not, how do we create them? If their spaces are not available, how do we force ourselves into the conversation? So I just want to hear maybe some of the reflections from the panelists. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Any more burning issue? I would take. There was a serious issue yesterday around gender and how we are putting. So if there is someone who wants to bring balance to the gender presentation issue, I will take that. If it's male voices, I will involve my dictatorial tendencies.
Went.
And, oh, yeah. I'll go for the gender. Thanks for the.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for the conversation and to the panelists. It's not necessarily an area that I work on or am super familiar with, but I came here to learn. And it was particularly interesting to hear from all of you, but also just the kind of sub-regional dimensions of this conversation. And I appreciate the intervention from the colleague who just spoke about people who are directly affected by the communities. I was hoping to hear from the organizers and the chair the ways in which, if at all, the ways in which two events are related to this conversation that we're having right now. One is the Constitutional Court decision regarding shell and extraction in the Gold Coast and the impacted communities. I mean, this just came out yesterday. I myself have not read the ruling, right? So I know, I don't know if you've read it, but just, obviously these are ongoing developments. And the second part of it is we have heard, and I don't know if anyone in the room is following this, but we have heard that there is a Zionist Israeli company that is exploring oil off the east coast, the eastern wild coast of South Africa. And and someone else on the panel mentioned the geopolitical dimensions of this conversation, how that exploration by an entity that the South African government is suing for genocide is doing exactly the same thing that they intend to do off the Mediterranean coast, off the Gaza Strip in South Africa. And what is our response as civil society and as litigators to that issue? So those two things for me, I know it's not a gender question, but yeah, I've covered you for gender and sexual orientation, if you're really so bold.
You've covered quite important. And your question, I think that those are questions that we want to take towards the end. And I know that the panel might have people that have browsed through the judgment yesterday, but clearly there's been a push on the using legal activism as another path of fighting the struggle. And I know that in Mozambique or similar cases, how we liberate on these judgments and begin to push for the same things in other countries. So I think very, very important question that we will have to maybe have it done at some point around the issues. The genocide issue is quite important. I know that we have a lot of comrades who are committed to speak on them. I want to give the panelists 45 seconds each to just let us know if you have to. If not, it's all good. Prof. Okay, let's go. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. I'll try to be quick in trying to answer your question. The fact is, yes, at least in Mozambique, we do have formalized spaces in which people can exercise their rights to participate in decision making. It's written in the Constitution, and there is this effort to create the space and to maintain them in a certain way. The problem for me is linked to the quality of governance, as we were trying to explain before. So very often citizens are invited to those places after priorities have been defined. But apart from that, what is more dangerous, in my opinion, is that the citizens' participation tends to be instrumentalized. And so instead of influencing the process, the decisions, and the policy, and to create that labor environment for prosperity and for community development, it's taking us to a dangerous way. So for me, it's not only the existence of those spaces that will make the difference. It's if we, once there, really have the power to influence, and this is not happening. And it's funny again that when the crisis, as I was explaining, we are now involved in this national inclusive dialogue. So when the crisis is there, then people are being called again to sit down and to bring their perspectives and vision and contribution to what the pathway should be to create a Mozambique which promises and delivers equal opportunities to everyone. But based on that experience, I can't say if it's going to work or not. But the point is, yes, they are formal space, but having the space is not enough. We must be able to change institutional behavior, and we must do it. We must commit ourselves as citizens and also has the state and represented by the government. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think let's give them Bishop. You want to? Okay.
Muito obrigado. Eu vou pegar aquilo que se disse aqui um pouco antes.
Thank you. What have we said before?
Nós somos os donos da festa. Nós somos os donos da festa. Convidamos o DJ para tocar a música. E nós é que dançamos. Agora, o grande problema é que tipo de música se toca, do dono da festa ou do DJ?
Which music is being danced? Of the owner of the party or the DJ's music?
A outra resposta também podia trazer é bíblica. Deus criou o mundo e deixou Adão para dar os nomes.
God created the world and left Adam to give the names.
Então, nisto, como africanos, e os recursos estão em África, nos nossos países, qual é a nossa responsabilidade?
All is considered according to our responsibility. The resources are.
Uma outra pergunta também podemos fazer: como é que as nossas universidades, as nossas escolas nos preparam em relação aos recursos que nós temos?
How are schools basically prepare
on the app. Also allows the particular companies that are affected, if it's a mining company, to respond. But for us, it gives us evidence of what's happening in the communities, but also evidence that we hope to generate. And it gives companies a chance to respond, and further on, it helps us to advocate, because I mean, you can only advocate based on this evidence that you have. We're talking about generating evidence. Another tool that we have is, this one is not a tool, it's a movement. It's called Pamoja Critical Minerals Alliance. Spoke about it briefly yesterday, but basically this is something that I think everyone in this room has to belong to. It's a movement. We're trying to get civil society actors to come together, advocate around these issues. So we have 100 chapters. The South Africa chapter is actually going to be launched later this month. We have Zambia, Zimbabwe, DRC. The idea is really that this movement grows outside of our organization. We are the secretariat, but we hope that it outgrows Southern Africa Resource Watch and becomes this movement that everyone can subscribe to and give ourselves big voice to amplify our voices around these issues. And the last one was grievance redress. I won't speak to it because it was mentioned previously. Assisting communities to get compensation, and basically if you have an issue, how do you get remedy? So we have those mechanisms that we work with. Just that in 1 minute. Looking ahead and where we see the gaps and what we think can be taken forward. Of course, some of these have already been highlighted. It's transparency issues. It's implementation. There's a huge gap between what is promised and what is actually delivered. That has already been spoken to. Community participation also was very much highlighted. Communities are invited, but they're never really participating. It's not that you tick the box. Something I want to highlight is the regional dimension as a gap, because we mentioned earlier that SADC is trying to develop regional mineral value chains, right? And as this is developed, we see that there has to be an accompanying way or accountability mechanism that crosses borders. So right now, everything is sitting in silos in different countries. And maybe this brings me to my closing point on what we think should be taken forward is beyond the Pamoja that I've spoken of, that I think has great potential for the region, because it should bring different civil society actors from all our different countries to build common ground and advocate around the same issues, is perhaps regional critical minerals accountability tracker, and maybe in that we could incorporate what you were mentioning earlier about climate issues. Again, there's a lot of regional projects. One of them is the Vito Corridor. A lot of issues have been promised, but we know that not all of that will be accomplished. So if we have some sort of tracker that tracks commitments that have been made, what progress ongoing or is being made, what are the commitments towards value addition, where are the gaps? I think this will help us to go a long way. I'll end there, but
thank you, Joko, and I think very important to know that they actually includes civil society. Even as we are doing whatever we are doing, there are tools that we can liberate that have already been developed. And that's why it's important for us to connect even more, because there will be things that we can use quite easily. The importance of the scorecard, I think that is going to be important. And civil society has to be deliberate and intentional about bringing the issues of accountability and developing these tools that we can collectively use in different spaces. And I want to move quickly, because there is, my brother, there is a very important question you asked. And this also is around our economies. We can look at critical minerals as if it's all happening in structured economies, formal economies, and what's the role of the informal economy, knowing that most of our countries are sustained by informal economy. How do we locate this needs in the informal sector, in the informal sector? And we have here Samuel Wadzai, who is the director of the Vegas Initiative for Social and Economic Justice, Social and Economic Transformation. They are working primarily at first in Zimbabwe and now across the region. In some way, when you look at the debates, that
all right, thanks so much.
I know that you might have a 10-minute presentation program. I want to cut it to 3 minutes, 15 seconds.
Yeah, that's good. All right, thanks so much. So my name is Samuel Wadzai, the Executive Director for the Vegas Initiative for Social and Economic Transformation. A Zimbabwean organization working to advance the rights and interests of former economic workers. The organization was established in 2015 as a response mainly to the huge proliferation of informal economy activities in the country, where now it's taken around 95% of the population working in the informal economy. So it has really become the economy. It's very hard to throw a stone in Harare and not hit an informal trader. So when the informal economy has become really the economy. So I think most important for this discussion, I think it's important to mention that Research 20 has also expanded beyond Zimbabwe. We've managed to establish what we call regional chapters. We've got a chapter here in South Africa, Namibia, Zambia, and Swaziland. This regional presence reflects our understanding that the challenges that informal economic workers are facing cannot be defined as national. You know, these are regional issues that I think most countries here will attest. The growth of the informal economy, the challenges that we are facing as informal economic workers, they cut across borders. So people, goods, minerals, money, livelihoods move across borders. And this is particularly important when we talk about critical minerals, peace and regional stability. Artisanal miners, I heard the last speaker really emphasize on that. Informal traders, cross-border traders, and communities living around many areas are directly connected to mineral economies. They experience both opportunities and risks, including exploitation, insecurity, weak regulation, environmental degradation, displacement, and exclusion from key decision-making processes. Therefore, when we talk about critical minerals governance, we must also talk about the people extract, transport, trade, and depend on these resources for their livelihoods. So VSET's contribution really to this conversation is to bring those voices from the informal economy into the center of these discussions on mineral governance, regional peace, economic justice, and inclusive development. We believe that if we are serious about building a peaceful and sustainable Southern Africa, informal economic workers cannot be just beneficiaries of policy, right? They must be recognized as participants, organized stakeholders, and partners in shaping solutions. So it's I think it's beyond the debate that the informal economy is going to be critical in these conversations. But I think in the interest of time, I think I can talk briefly about the issue of formalization. We've seen many governments, including ours in Zimbabwe, pushing for the formalization of the informal economy. And basically their thrust there is to ensure that they tax or they bring them to the tax bracket for the purpose of collecting money really. And we are saying, as we said, that formalization, even including the governance of mineral resources, should not be about taxation alone, but it should be about development, it should be about eradication of poverty, it should be about inclusion, in key decision-making processes. And that's why we've taken a key interest, as we said, to participate in the development of the formalization strategy, which the government of Zimbabwe recently adopted. And it speaks to issues of mineral governance. And we are very keen as an organization to be part of that. And finally, I think the key person really now for it now, policymakers, is can we build a critical mineral resource economy that is globally competitive without reproducing the inequalities of Africa's historical extractive economy? My big answer is yes, but only if we place people, communities, and decent livelihoods at the center of mineral governance. If critical minerals are to power a global green transition, they must also power in African economic transformation. And that transformation must include the formal economy workers, not as a problem, be eliminated, but as an economic conscience that must be organized, and supported. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. The importance of putting people at the center of what we are doing, that police must be police for the sake of police. We end up helping to eliminate the poor so that the economy can survive. And that would be fine. I want to move back briefly into Mozambique. So it's important that we understand that our problems are so common that if you remove Mozambique and put South Africa and put Zimbabwe, put another country in the region, the story will be the same. It's only the country you have put. If you remove somewhere when it talks about Zimbabwe, take out Zimbabwe and put Swaziland, put Mozambique, the story will be the same. And going back into Mozambique, I know that decide. I know we have focused mainly on the critical mineral debate a lot. Its nexus with, of course, peace and stability. And it would be a good time to bring in Dr. Woken Diaz, who is leading one of the most exciting organizations for me in Mozambique, in that site. I know that they've done a lot of work in building church. What has been happening, the dialogue process, which was instituted, I think we had already from Fidelia, which was instituted after the political violence, post-election political violence of 2024. But they are doing more as well in Cabo Delgado. I know that he stays in Beira, but they are to bring him from Beira, which means that they're doing more. So take us through the work you're doing at the moment, yes, and a sense of are we getting closer to solutions in Mozambique? And what lessons should we be taking in and out of Mozambique from the rest of the region? I know that you've documented a lot of issues around human rights, the dialogue itself. I like to see most of what's happening. I go to your website and the emails you send, and that's been quite important to some of us who are outside. But take us through in 2.5 minutes what you are doing.
It's not a 3 minutes. It's a 3 minutes. So I will bring three perspectives. One, it's about the national dialogue, but I think it's important to make a mention about the mineral process in Mozambique. Maybe you can make a relation. So the national dialogue, it's one of the other dialogue we have in Mozambique after the electoral process. I think that national dialogue, it's one, the elections, it's a principal reason for that national dialogue, but we think that is a trigger because we have other problems, the social problems. If you go to the access of the education, access of the health service, access for the jobs and etc., and the distribution of the natural resources, because we have that protections of in each project, 10% going to the communities. But if we go to that communities who that natural resources are stressed, you will not see the impact of that 10%. And that is the reason we saw the movement of the demonstration in all our country. That is not only because we have the elections. The election is a trigger of that all problems we solve. But if we look straight for the national dialogue, the politicians created one commission. On that commission, we have the representation of the political parties. I think we have 19 persons from the political parties, and we have 3 persons from the civil society who can lead with that 10 subjects. On that 10 subjects, we have the elections, we have the reforms in the administration sector, of security sector, and etc. And they make the auscultation in the most part of the province and the most part of the district. And on the last phase of the second phase of the national dialogue, he made the auscultation for more than 50,000 people in all country, more than 50,000. And we have that they open a door to the civil society to give that contribution on that whole process, and we all agree with this. But the problem is the impact. If you look on this new phase of the national dialogue, the all materials of the auscultation, the all materials of the contribution of the civil society is not reflected on this new step. So what is the reason we make that auscultation? What is the reason we make that contribution? Is only for the English speak, or to try to solve our problems? Because so many people have expectation about it. And if we don't have our contributions on that new step of the national dialogue, maybe we will see the worst situation one more time in the next elections. Because it's like I said, the elections, it's a trigger. You will see the same thing in Tanzania on next month, because the president said we have that expectation to create one national dialogue. And if we have the expectation to create a national dialogue, maybe we will be a new cinema film or something like that. So it's important to see what is the phase, what is the reason we create that phase? So what is the reason we receive that contributions of the people? Because if we receive it, we have some expectation, and we don't have that expectation. That is the one problem. The second problem is the communication. The commission have created the blogs and etc., the account on Facebook and etc., to try to disseminate it, but it's not enough. They need, for example, after they created or use the television channel to try to create some dissemination information, use the community radio to try to disseminate that information, but we don't see this. And the people in the community don't receive that information, like, okay, on day 1, we will receive it, the National Commission or the Technical Commission to auscultation. And that's created one other big problem, the communication problem. Because if you go more deep, we receive some information, for example, the political party in power are mobilized the people to go into the auscultation and said, okay, all people who go into the auscultation, you need to say, we don't need reforms, or we need moderated reforms. And this is dangerous, because we only have on the auscultation people from the one political party, because the other people from the different parties don't have access to that information, because they go into the television on day 1 and said, okay, in 2 days we will make auscultation in all districts. But okay, in 2 days it's possible to send the message for the people, it's possible to see on the television, it's possible to the other political parties mobilize the people to participate. Not. So this is the form to exclude the people from that process. And the people are watching it. Right now, the situation is very calm. But if we have one other trigger, the people maybe will be at, and the reactions maybe will be worse, because in the other part, the government or buy a new material to repression the people in case of demonstration. So I think we will see more blood if we don't make the correct intent and use the process of the exploitation in the favor of the people. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. And I think very, very important to really tie these things together, because the national dialogue, those of us who have been following, we know that there's 10 thematic areas, and it's really trying to address not just the political post-election violence issues, the economy, the social issues. They're trying to be as comprehensive as can be. And the question.
Sorry, Mujose, can you cut me for the next 30 seconds? The next one. Yeah, just to say, during that national dialogue, we have two forms. One is for the reforms, and the second is for the reconciliation. But we make only addition for the reforms and not for the reconciliation. During the demonstration, we lost more than 400 people, and more than 3,000 people injured, more than 7,000 people in the jail, and right now more than 1,000 people still in the jail. And we try to protect the people. And in the law, who approves that national dialogue, he make a mention to the pardon, he make a mention to the reconciliation. But we only pay attention to the reforms, not to the reconciliation. And in other parts, we have one other big problem, the accountability. Who is the person who have the responsibility of that all that? Because we have the families, we have that feeling when we provide the psychosocial support, we're feeling hungry in the face of the families because you need justice. But if you don't have justice, maybe that will be the other trigger to have the people in the streets one more time. Thank you.
Issues of participation and inclusion again at the center of the solution we try to build. And I think as civil society, this kind of experiences help us to really develop a holistic view of the enormity of the challenges we face and begin to not one-dimensional solving problems. What we need to do is a face of these kind of challenges. The work at the end is massive. And I want to ask Jonathan, and Jonathan is with the Youth Political Participation Initiatives now, but I really met him when he was doing some exciting work with an organization called Liaison in Mozambique. Jonathan, where are the young people?
So, thank you, Josie. I'm very honored by the invitation that was made by SALO. I would like to start by greeting all and extend my greetings to all the young people that are in this room right now. I will be brief, just to say that the work that we have been undertaking is about the youth political participation in the National Inclusive Dialogue. So since the launch of dialogue last year, we have undertaken work that engaged young people in the process, because the national dialogue that is unfolding in Mozambique is a response to the post-election conflicts. So when we talk about youth political participation, the conventional way to do that is through elections. And when we have election problems, and we clearly see that the majority of the people that are protesting are youth, we shouldn't look over it, So the work that we have been doing in Mozambique is to engage these young people that were participating in in the protests to really engage in the national inclusive dialogue. The work that we have been taking went through workshops and ended with a compilation of priorities that we shared with the technical commission responsible for the dialogue. But now we have been monitoring the dialogue by participating in the we call it they call it public audience. So one of the last phases of the national inclusive dialogue. So we participate on those meetings just to ensure that the priorities that we shared with the national inclusive dialogue are really being discussed. Because even when we look at SADC region, we look at the policies, at the legislation that exists, we should make one question, to make sure that our intervention is taken serious. It is to see if people's lives are really getting better from our intervention. I believe that's the point. We can do reforms, we can design agendas, but if the community, if the young people livelihood are not improving, it's still work to be done. And to not take much of the time, I would just like to share a discussion that I had about youth political participation in this inclusive national dialogue. As my colleague here stated, there are 10 themes that is being discussed to do reforms in Mozambique. I would like to suggest that rather than look into the 10 points, we would be more efficient if we look at only one reform, and that one reform should unlock other reforms that will make people's lives better. That's the important thing. And continue as civil society to promote a bottom-up approach, in meaning that if you're talking about peace, security, even critical minerals governance, we should look at young people, at the communities, and start by asking what the community wants, and how should we take that to make reforms. And thank you. Okay.
I think that's one of the things that young people bring a lot of energy into, but more importantly, they are very clear as to what needs to be done. And that's what was very clear about Mozambique. And as many other Mozambicans will tell you, the post-election demonstrations were largely by young people who expressed their discontent with the direction trajectory Mozambique state. And issues of at what point we begin to see dividends in the work we do, dividends of the liberation struggle themselves, the kinds of frustration that we begin to see across the continent. And the issue of dialogue, we brought it into this discussion on peace and security, extraction and conflict, because dialogues have become an important phenomenon in this region. I don't think there is a country in this region that is not going through some dialogue. South Africa, Pet will tell you that they are in the middle of a dialogue. And actually, we have to begin to ask ourselves, are these dialogue waiting? And we are waiting for who? What lessons have we learned from the previous dialogues that have happened across this region? There was a Poland dialogue in Zimbabwe some years ago. And those governments you see here, they participated in that Poland. But they are in the same problems they were discussing in that dialogue 10 years ago. So we really have to ask ourselves at some point, what are we missing as we come to the table to try and solve our problems? What lessons do we borrow? And that's very important. And that's why for Mozambique, I kept insisting every time I'm in Mozambique. You need to look at the report and say, we should not repeat what has produced failed results in other countries. We should be able to say, these are lessons that we can do. The major difference the Mozambican dialogue is that it's slow now. So there is some ground to seek remedy if it doesn't lead to the expectations of that. Maybe the Zimbabwe dialogue was not a parliamentary process. But I think there are many lessons colleagues from Mozambique to really take from the region as you try to find solutions in the dialogue process. But thank you, Jonathan. I want to quickly, again, our problems are the same. I want to quickly get into others are calling it Eswatini. Colleagues from Eswatini have told me that it remains Swaziland until they decide. So I want to move to my Tao Masu, who leads a very capable team in the foundation in Swaziland. And Swaziland, like many other countries in the region, remained a problem child for the region. In 2021, it showed us at the end of power when we want power at all costs. And Tao and many other colleagues from Swaziland here were on the core face of that struggle, on the recipient end of calamity. So our only important king is King Swati. And so, Tabo, what lessons we take from Mozambique, from Swaziland, and bring it to this region? As we try to, because the connection between peace and security and the general well-being of people's minds cannot be overemphasized. There is an important connection. And as we have seen, the importance of the regional law in guaranteeing security and stability at times has been brought into question many times. From your experiences in Swaziland, what message can we leave for the
Thank you, Congress.
We have 2 minutes, 4
It's good because you let me prepare for the first 2 weeks. For 2 minutes. But good afternoon, Congress and colleagues. As introduced, Parliament from Swaziland,
So you don't have to worry. The guys next door, they say that they're meeting other than
yeah, so also from
now you're
Swaziland. So very important. We've realized that our problems are the same as the countries from the regional bloc. And the lessons from Mozambique are very, intricate and important for us as fellow countries in the region. We can see similarities in terms of repression, can see similarities in terms of resistance, and regional concern without action across the different countries. And the very specific example of the 2021 uprising in Swaziland, where, the people were massacred for nearly demanding democratic reform, and they were met with a violent crackdown by the state as led by the security cluster. And the strategy of the people of Swaziland, I think one must mention that
they were based on fundamental freedoms that they are denied on a daily basis, but also the access to these critical minerals and resources that we are talking about today. And what we have realized and the lessons that we are learning from there is that when people are excluded from decision making, the grievances deepen on a daily basis. And when these peaceful demands are answered without force, trust collapses. Not only internally in Swaziland, because we have a tendency as a region or a bloc to treat these as internal affairs of the individual countries. But when this trust collapses in Swaziland, it also collapses on the regional bloc itself. But also, when citizens are treated as terrorists rather than stakeholders, the state legitimacy erodes. And when this legitimacy erodes, security becomes the governing model, not development, which is what we are seeing in the region. Now security has become a governing model for most of our states in the region, rather than it being a development model. But also, I think what became the biggest lesson for Swazis in this was the response from the limited or non-response from the regional body, but also from other countries within the region. And the near silence became policy or policy signal to us as the people of Swaziland to say it is now policy for the regional body and even other countries in the region that when other people within the region are brutally assaulted, murdered, and killed by the state, our people will just keep quiet, no solidarity, and no condemnation to those actions by the state. And that conditional solidarity, when it persists, impunity then endures. So the way in which we react as the region, gives confidence to these governments to say what they are doing is right, and they continue to do it over and over again. What this teaches us about peace and security is the fact that regional peace and security cannot be reduced to border management, ceasefires, and counterinsurgency programs. Peace in our region must also mean peace and dignity. The dignity of our people comes first, but also economic justice and political accountability. If governance systems treat citizens' demands for rights and reforms as security threats, then security becomes synonymous with repression. In that condition, peace becomes temporary and stability becomes a cover for violence. So the most uncomfortable truth about that this panel is to phrase and deal with is that critical governance minerals is not merely an economic domain, but it's a governance test. And when it fails, the region's peace is put at risk. So those are some of the lessons that from what has happened in Mozambique, what is happening in Zimbabwe, what continues to happen here in South Africa, is really putting, the whole regional peace at risk. I think in a nutshell, just to try and summarize what I prepared, I think that is all I can say.
Thank you, comment. Apologies for rushing you. I know it's really unfair. But I think what is clear is that the message that we can underline, there are problems, as I said, across the region. And the more we begin to build real and genuine collaboration and solidarity, the easier it will be to begin to move towards sustainable solutions. And the colleagues who are in the other room, we are about to let welcome, we'll have to endure what we are doing. And I want to move to the last speaker of the day. Gift in three minutes. So Gift Sizira is former member of parliament for Tavalala in Zimbabwe, targeted by the regime in Zimbabwe. But he's at the center of the young people's voices across the continent. And Gift, we have been discussing since morning about the nexus between critical minerals, governance, the issue of peace and security in the region. As someone who has interacted with power at that level, and as a young person, where do you guys went this debate? We have heard as well that at the center of the challenges we face is the issue of governance, that we might jump on top of mountains and hills, and as long as our approach to governance has not been addressed, it will be difficult to decisively offer solutions to the challenges that we face as a nation.
Thank you very much. I think that the issue that has been under discussion is an important one, mineral resource governance in the continent, because it is emerging as a central basis upon which Africa can be able to advance, particularly our region, its development agenda. So it is a development question. And we're doing so because of the crisis of poverty and inequality in the entire region. And Mozambique, I think, is a very relevant example because it exemplifies that contradiction that above is a poor population, but underneath are mineral-rich resources that we've been discussing this morning. And I think because it is a development issue, we avoid what, in my view, is also an important conversation on development, which is the ideological question. If you had listened to Prof's contribution in the morning, how the IMF and the World Bank's entry into Mozambique, into its gas production conversation, and promising the Mozambicans 10 years ago that Mozambique will become the Qatar of the continent, defining the energy sector in the continent. And 10 years down the line, Mozambique is worse than it was. So the ideological question is important in the development conversation in the region, because the solution cannot be with the World Bank. The solution cannot be with the Paris Club of Lenders. The solution cannot be with the Bretton Woods institutions, because they are responsible for the crisis in Zimbabwe. They came in Zimbabwe during ISA and proposed the structural adjustment program at their biggest. And the country started retrenching, privatization, and so forth. And they are back again in that country. Because the IMF and the World Bank is very good in the quantitative growth of the economy. That is numbers. They don't mind about the qualitative growth of the economy. That's why today they talk about stability in microeconomic terms. So for me, the ideological question is important. And once you talk about the ideological question in answering the mineral resource question in the continent, you are talking about confronting power. It is politics, stupid. It is the politics that the region must be able to talk about. Because at the end of the day, the dialogue that's happening in Mozambique is the political issues. And that is why the Mozambican government cannot go into the roots of justice and seeking justice for the recent victims, 300 of them that passed away. But they are going into the Lilliput approach by the Paris Club of Lenders to talk about dialogue, reforms, which we know are not going to happen, because, I mean, in Zimbabwe, one of the professors said they can't reform themselves out of power. So all those reforms are just meant to manage international community, to manage observer mission, which again takes us back to the role of SADC, because we're discussing today, because heads of states are going to be meeting. SADC condemned the electoral outcome in Zimbabwe. It said the elections there are not free and fair. They did not pass the SADC test of free and fair election. And what happened after? It is the same SADC which was congratulating the head of state with Cyril being the first person to endorse the fascist regime in Iran. You go to the election in Mozambique, condemned by all credible observer missions, whether it's the African Union, SADC, the Carter Center, the European Union. But it is the same government in the continent, in the name of liberation, sisterhood, and brotherhood, that will endorse a regime that is not a product of the people. That regime will continue extracting the resources, not for the benefit of even themselves, because these elites are not benefiting from these resources. They are being extracted either now by Chinese or by all these elites who are extracting the continent. So for me, the question is ideological, and the question lands, if it is illogical, it lands on the question of power, and that is where we must resolve. Thank you.
So in the end, civil society must think about building power, to confront power. We have to find solutions. Colleagues, help me to thank this panel again. Thank the area panel and this panel. And as promised, I know that the other colleagues might not know what we are discussing, but as promised earlier, we will share the presentations from colleagues, but also the outcome of this. I think there have been a number of concrete recommendations that have been put on the table in terms of what should happen moving forward as we try to find solutions. Not to the critical minerals governance crisis in isolation, but to all the problems that we face. And we learned that we can never isolate. It's a polycrisis. The crisis fits from one crisis fits from the other, and you can't address the other without addressing the other. So we need to really think about where we are civil society and what we need. Thank you so much, colleagues, and enjoy what remains of this summit, and see you in future. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. That is the end of the panel discussion. See you all. Thank you.